Good morning, AP Bio, and welcome to day 68 and 69 technically. If we look at this, you're going to be going after GR49 and GR50, which will look into how the nervous system works within individuals and nerves themselves, and then further into sensory organs. GR50 is probably one of my favorites in prep for next week. You're also going to do an Endocrine Pathways mini poster and go after the 2017 FRQ with a little self-grading. You can see where the review is for the next one. Today, of course, day 68, our target is the endocrine system and understanding how it actually works, the role of it, and then how negative feedback plays a role within that. So, one thing that we can see, of course, is this little monster, Lego My Ego. This is Benny making a run for it. They love, of course, the Egos because they're sweet. They're dripping with sugar called syrup. I also, of course, run NHS only for one reason. It's the donuts, man. The Donut of the Month Club, as they call it. So let's say you're like Homer, and you pound down one of these delicious donuts. What's that going to do to your blood glucose levels? Well, that's typically something that we'd like to figure out. You're going to draw and label the simplest steps of an endocrine pathway, and then draw and explain how your body regulates blood glucose levels. Make sure you think about Homer and his giant donut. Mojo. I wish I had a helper monkey too. Mojo, give me a donut. So write down the questions, and then, of course, pause me, and that'll give you a chance to try to answer them on your own, because hopefully you know some of this stuff. Cool, my time is up. If we look at the endocrine pathway, one of the things that we can notice with this is it's called endocrine. And the endocrine system is one of the most complex that you can have. Fortunately, my mommy worked with an endocrinologist, so I got an early exposure to it. If we look at the endo part, we've run into that before, that means inside. The crine part is referring to a secretion. So this is something that secretes substances into your body, and it keeps them on the inside. And what do they usually secrete? It secretes these things called hormones. And what are hormones? Hormones are chemical control messages. So, of course, if you can say to somebody, their body's running with hormones, they must be a teenager, that's because there's a lot of different chemical messages going on when you're a teenager. That's what makes puberty so awkward and fun, right? Now, cool thing is it's complex, but it always follows the same steps. It always is led off by this thing called a stimulus, right? So stimulus is when there's something that is too low or too high, right? And that's throwing off something inside the body, and the body has to know this. So for example, one stimulus could be pH. pH can be registered as too low by this thing called the duodenum. And the duodenum, of course, is that first section of the small intestine. It notices the pH is too low, which is pretty normal because usually that's chyme coming from the stomach because you're moving food down from an acidic stomach into your small intestine, which can't handle that kind of acidity, right? So the stimulus will always be noticed by something, and that something is going to be an endocrine cell. And the endocrine cell has a couple of jobs. One of its jobs is to act like a sensor. Right? And then its other job, as its name suggests, endocrine, inside secrete, is once it senses something, its job is to do a secretion, to send out a message, right? Now, the endocrine cells can be found in glands throughout your bodies, or they can be actual organs. Lots of your organs are part of the endocrine system. Now, the good news is the pH was too low and it got to the duodenum. The duodenum actually is part of your endocrine system. And it notices that the pH is too low, and so it secretes. It starts sending out messages, and it's going to secrete a hormone. When it secretes that hormone, of course, it has the most creative name ever. It's called secretin, and it's an easy one to keep track of. Notice that a lot of these hormones end with "in," which is a pretty good sign that it's a protein-based hormone. You've heard of other ones like melatonin, right? If we look at this, it's going to secrete that hormone. Where's it going to send the message to? Well, it's going to send it to the entire body, and the best way to get around the entire body is to secrete it on the inside, so it's going to secrete it to your bloodstream. These are inside secretions inside the body, outside the cell. And as it flows into the bloodstream, that's going to broadcast it to everybody, right? Every single cell inside your body. But it's only going to talk to certain cells that it targets. Now, it's a protein, which means it has a specific shape. And that specific shape is going to target only those target cells, what they're called, that have the right shaped receptor. Basically, they got a baseball mitt that fits perfectly with the hormone baseball that's going out there. And these target cells are found inside of our tissues. And in this case, of course, this hormone, which is what is being secreted, it's going into the bloodstream, it's talking to everybody, but it's only being listened to by the tissue when in doubt, the pancreas. Good old scrambled eggs, of course, does a lot of things. This is just one of the things it does. So when in doubt, scrambled eggs. It's the pancreas, right? Now, the good thing is the pancreas has these receptors to pick up on this secretin hormone, and that causes it to change what its cell's doing. It's a cellular response. It's almost like this is tied to cell signaling, because it is, right? And what that will do for cells is first there's a stimulus, the endocrine cell notices it, sends out the hormone message, goes to the target cells. The response is to change the concentration of something, either to raise it or to lower something in the body, to change the actual concentration, right? In this case, the pancreas is right there attached to the duodenum. It has a duct that goes into it, and it notices, of course, that the duodenum says, hey, it's too low a pH. So then the pancreas releases something that makes the pH go up. It releases bicarbonate ions. Don't know why the pen's messing up this morning. If it releases bicarbonate, hey, that's a buffer. It acts as a base. In this case, it's going to cause it to gobble up protons and make the pH go back up, which is good because the small intestine operates in a basic pH, works best with its proteins in that category. Now notice what happened here. One of the crucial things is you had a stimulus, fired off an endocrine cell to send out its hormones, target a target cell, and then the response caused the stimulus to shut down. All right? The pH was too low. This caused it to make the pH go back up. Hey, that's where, of course, a product just canceled a process, the stimulus in this case, right? Hey, anytime that you increase a product which shuts off a process, that's called negative feedback. And that's how your body actually controls most things inside of it. It uses negative feedback mechanisms to do that. And the endocrine is a perfect example of this, which is why the AP loves to use it as, hey, a way to test on to see if you understand negative feedback. So the stimulus always leads to response, which then shuts off the stimulus. And that's how you control yourself, all by concentration, right? Now, a more complex one would have to do with things like Homer and his donut. That's because, of course, we have this stuff called blood glucose, what's simply known by most people as blood sugar levels. And in your body, there is this magical balance, a number that will keep you at homeostasis for your blood glucose levels. And that is approximately 90 milligrams for every 100 milliliters of the water or the blood that's there, right? So cool thing about this, if you're hanging at homeostasis, that's perfect for your cells in resting condition. They're nice and happy, right? And then you go to an NHS meeting and you eat a donut. Oh, baby. Or maybe 3. That's what I like to do. Because those maple bars, they're hard to resist, right? As soon as you eat that donut, now you're going to dump into your blood lots of extra sugar. So your blood glucose level is going to go up. You're now going to have a high blood glucose level. Well, your body notices that. There's a bunch of glucose, little hexagons. We'll pretend those are hexagons. That, of course, is a stimulus that your body's going to notice. There's something that's too high. You have too much glucose, right? Who's going to pay attention to that? Well, it's always going to be an endocrine cell. And the endocrine cell that's paying attention to your blood glucose, let me think about it. When in doubt, scrambled eggs. It's the pancreas. Now, the pancreas, of course, notices that blood glucose is too high, and so being an endocrine cell, its job is to secrete. It goes through a secretion. It's going to secrete a hormone, and in this case, it's the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. Great name for it. But the beta cells release one of the most famous of all hormones out there. You probably heard of it. It's called insulin, especially if you're diabetic. You know well about it. Hey, it ends with an IN. It must be a protein-based hormone, which means the message is on the outside. And it releases, of course, those into your blood. So as it's secreted out to the blood, we send in this message out. It's going to be targeting somebody. It's going to be targeting the target cells. And with those target cells, this one actually targets 2 groups of cells. One of the ones it targets in your abdomen is called your liver. My liver, right? And that's going to cause a response in the liver. What it's going to do is pretty cool. The other one it's going to target is all of your body cells, especially things like your muscles and stuff. And with your body cells and the liver cells, one of the first messages that it sends and tells it is its response is quite simple. I always remember with insulin, there was too much glucose outside, so it makes the glucose go in the cells. The cool thing about that, if it goes in the cells, now it's not in the blood. Hey, I had a stimulus. I'm starting to shut it off, right? The other end that's more complex is the liver can do more than that. It allows the glucose to go into the cells, dropping blood glucose levels, but it also does another thing. It's a converter, so it stores it as glycogen. Glycogen, of course, is the animal version of starch. It's going to link all of those sugars together, and now it's not glucose. It's a stored kind of tater inside your liver, right? Now, cool thing about this, both the liver doing that and your body cells cause the blood glucose levels to drop. Hey, we had a stimulus. Now blood sugar is dropping, and hopefully it drops right back down to homeostasis. Hey, a product, glycogen, and the insertion of the thing shut off the process, right? We had too much blood glucose, so that caused it to get stored inside. Beautiful negative feedback loop right there. Now, let's say that you're kind of feeling guilty because you ate all those donuts. I never would, but somebody would. And you decide, hey, I'm going to run off those calories. So you go for a run, right? I don't know why you do that, but it's just some people do it, right? As you go for that run, one of the things is your muscles are going to use up glucose. And where are they going to get that from? They're going to get it from your blood. So that would cause your blood glucose level, your blood sugar, to go lower because you're burning it off, right? This is something that is too low a stimulus. Now, who notices that your blood sugar drops too low? Well, that's always going to be an endocrine cell because there are sensors, right? And who's noticing that one again? Hey, when in doubt, pancreas. It's the scrambled eggs. They're awesome, right? In this case, however, this is going to be noticed by the pancreas that is too low. And then alpha cells, a different type of cell in the pancreas, they're going to go through secretion because they always go in that pathway. Stimulus, sensor, secretion, right? As it goes there, it's going to send out a different hormone. In this case, it's not going to be insulin because that would have the opposite effect. Instead, your body notices something. Your body just noticed that the glucose is gone. So it releases this stuff called glucagon. Easy way to remember it, right? Now, the cool thing about this is as it releases the glucagon, that does a great thing. It goes out to the blood and it shoots out and it's targeting target cells. Now, your body is low on glucose. So who's got a storage of something that's like glucose? It's called the liver. It's a horrible liver, right? If we look at that, it has the target cells. And the cool thing is glucose was gone, but glucagon brings it back. Basically what it does is it triggers the liver to take all that long chains of animal starch called glycogen, and it breaks it down. When it breaks it down, it breaks the glycogen back into its subunits, its building blocks called glucose. And it also causes them to release them back out into the blood. Because now, of course, your body's saying, hey, I need sugar, blood it out. As it does that, that makes your blood glucose levels do an amazing thing. They were too low. Now it makes them go higher. It rises it, right? As it raises it, it goes back to hopefully a homeostasis, and you're back into balance. Notice once again, we had something too low. There wasn't enough of it. So, hey, it shut off the process of storing it and caused the process of releasing it, making it go higher. It's a negative feedback loop. Now, it's probably not going to do it just perfect because it's just releasing it by a concentration gradient. So it's probably going to get a little too high, and then you're going to have to release some insulin. And that will cause it to get a little too low, and then you're going to release some glucagon. And that's why if you're a diabetic, you're always watching your blood glucose levels and taking a blood sample to see what they are, to know whether or not you need an insulin injection or a glucagon injection, depending on the type of diabetes that you have. And a lot of Americans have diabetes, and more of them are having it because, of course, it's tied to diet in one form of it, right? Now, key thing about this, of course, we can notice this is a prime example of negative feedback. Hold down here so the pen is touchy. You are increasing the product, right? This is, of course, going to be your insulin, which would then decrease the process. Or you could release extra glucagon, which would then shut off the process because eventually you'd run out of the blood. The blood would go back out in the sugar, and you'd stop releasing the glucagon. These are both examples of a tied together negative feedback loop where increasing the product decreases the process. You had too much blood sugar, you stored it. You had too little blood sugar, you released it, right? So, of course, we control all of our hormones with that stuff, or all of our body processes with the hormones in our endocrine system, which always follows the same pathway, right? Now, back on the topic, of course, of the immune system, which we looked at last time and we'd be looking at again, wouldn't it be cool if on our COVID vacation, before that, they had a toe opener to open up the bathroom door. So you never had to touch the bathroom handle. But that's what folks in other countries, of course, are thinking of way ahead of this stuff. Now, in addition to that, of course, today we would normally finish off the second half of our immune presentations. We don't get to do that. So you can just look at the PowerPoint that I provided you and miss out on it. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, we'd also take a look at GR45 today. And GR45 is one of those monsters. And the big idea behind GR45 is it's all about the endocrine system. If we look at the endocrine system, it's a chemical control system. It sends out chemicals to control whether things are too high or too low. And it tends to take time doing that. When it does that, it sends out most of those as hormones. Some are protein-based, some are amines, some are lipids, and they are detected by the cells in different ways. So it goes back to cell signaling, but hormones are just messages. And if you're getting lots of messages, that could make things confusing, like the puberty years. Yay! Now, in addition to that, the way that we control how those messages go out and what they do to the cells is negative feedback. Remember, this is how we control most things. If you increase the product, right, it shuts off a process. If there's too much blood sugar, then insulin goes up and it puts the glucose back into the cells, and shuts off too much blood sugar. So it's an awesome system to do that. Now, to get a hold on that, these are the hormones that the AP usually loves and the most important ones in terms of medicine. ADH, growth hormone, oxytocin, etc., TSH, T3, and T4 are all tied together. Hey, they got a T, must have something to do with the thyroid. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to create a mini poster, take a piece of paper, fold it like you would for a hot dog bun. And when you do that, you're going to divide those 4 sections, and you're going to answer these 7 questions. You're going to take 4 of those that you want to know like an expert, so you can write an essay about them at some point, hint, hint. And you want to figure out, what is it stimulated by? Where is it released from? What type of hormone or chemical class? Is it an amine? Is it a protein? Is it a lipid? Look at their names. It kind of tells you, right? And then what tissues does it act on? What's the target cells? What does it do to that cell? What's it make it turn on or turn off or produce? How is it regulated? That's pretty easy for most, though realize that some have positive feedback, right? And of course, are there disorders? What are the disorders located to it? Why does it make sense that there's a disorder? Like we've given you one today, diabetes, right? There's type 1 and type 2 that are predominant. A good example that I gave you, which I should see on your poster, is what we did for our ETD. So we can see here that the pH affects the duodenum, and the duodenum releases secretin, goes in the blood, and then it targets cells in the pancreas, which releases bicarbonate, which brings the pH back up to a higher rate and shuts off the stimulus. Then, of course, you can see that they're going to have weird problems with disorders of ulcers in the small intestine if you don't have that, because you're dumping a bunch of acid into the small intestine. So good thing it's regulated, right? In addition, of course, the book has lots of those pathways. Here are the basic directions for it. There'll also be a PowerPoint attached with the directions, but they're right there. One thing that we can see is another example, and the book is loaded with them. It gives you all these pathways laid out for you. Let's say suckling, or a baby just cries in a waiting room, and its mom does a crazy thing. She suddenly starts lactating. Now, the way this works, of course, is suckling or crying can cause a nerve response, which causes the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary to then secrete oxytocin, the feel-good chemical. As that feel-good chemical goes out, it goes into the bloodstream, targets cells inside of that mother's muscles of her breast, which then cause her to release milk from her mammary glands, which then, of course, will release that milk and end the crying, and the baby will, of course, be satiated and filled, so therefore the baby will stop suckling because it's full. So, hey, if we look at this, one of the things that we can notice, of course, is it starts off as a positive feedback. As the baby suckles more, it'll actually cause more milk to be produced until the milk runs out, and then the baby will stop crying and suckling, which causes the positive feedback part to disappear from that. But it's kind of nice to, or mean to go into a waiting room with a bunch of ladies that have new babies and play the sound of a crying baby, and they will all begin lactating. Cruel, but another good evidence of how we do that. Now, why would that evolve? Well, in the old days, if you're in a cave and a baby started crying, you would want to start producing milk. Otherwise, a cave bear would come and eat you, right? Or the baby would starve. So this is all the responses to that. Interestingly, oxytocin also makes the mother feel loved, which is one of the reasons why one of those intimate experiences that are described by new mothers is breastfeeding their babies, because they feel this immense amount of love because, well, if you didn't love the baby, you'd be really tired of it crying. Kind of makes sense, right? Now, you're going to go after GR 49 and 50 to dig in and get ready for the next time. This week, you're going to be working on your endocrine posters as well in the 2017. Hope to see you at the review, people. Woo!